They say you're too quiet, too intense, too much. When you speak, the room often falls silent, not because you're wrong, but because you're different. You notice things others don't. You ask questions most people never even think about. And slowly people start to drift away. They laugh at things that don't amuse you. They chase trends, gossip, and distractions, while you find yourself thinking deeply about life, meaning, and even death. You try to fit in. You smile when you're supposed to, but deep down you feel like a stranger, even around people your own age. Eventually you start to wonder, is there something wrong with me? But what if the problem isn't you at all? What if society just isn't made for minds like yours? The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer believed that true intelligence can feel like a curse. He said the deeper you think, the more isolated you become. Not because you're broken, but because most people don't want the truth. They want comfort, and people who think deeply, they tend to challenge that comfort. It starts early. You're in a classroom surrounded by others your age, yet you feel out of place. Not better than them, just disconnected. While others laugh at jokes, you're stuck wondering why people say things they don't mean, why small talk feels pointless, and why you often feel like you're just observing life instead of living it. This is the quiet curse of deep thinking. Not the kind that earns awards or top grades, but the kind that sees through lies, questions everything, and feels everything too deeply. As time goes on, you start to hold back. You've learned that being honest makes people uncomfortable. Asking why too many times ruins the mood. So you nod, you smile, you pretend. But inside, it feels like no one truly understands you. People mistake you for arrogant, but really you're just tired. Tired of trying to explain yourself. You're not cold. You've just realized that your depth makes others uneasy. So you stay quiet. You hide your thoughts. You swallow your pain. This is the contradiction. Society claims to admire intelligence, but in real life, it often rejects those who carry it in its rawest, most honest form. We celebrate genius on paper, but when we meet it face to face, the kind that questions rules, sees through fake smiles, and won't play along, we often push it away. Why? Because real intelligence doesn't just fix problems. It challenges the way things are. It makes people think in ways they'd rather avoid. Over time, you may find it hard to connect with others. You might feel too thoughtful for casual conversations, too aware to fully relax, too sensitive to ignore what others miss. And the emotional weight of that is heavy, even if no one sees it. You can be in a room full of people and still feel alone. What you long for is a real connection, someone who doesn't just hear your words but understands your soul. But that person rarely comes. And so, once again, you ask, is there something wrong with me? That's the hidden pain no one talks about. The world teaches smart people how to succeed, but not how to exist when your mind works differently. So you adapt. You learn to blend in, to hide your truth, to speak less. Not because you want to, but because every time you showed your real self, it cost you. But even as you hide, the weight builds. A quiet sadness, a deep hunger for something more. Have you ever felt like you see the world differently, but no one truly sees you? Have you ever asked yourself, am I the only one who feels this way? You're not. That quiet struggle you're going through isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of a rare mind trying to survive in a shallow world. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer saw this pattern a long time ago. He didn't just understand your pain, he predicted it. There's an unspoken rule that runs through most of society. Don't think too much, don't question the script, don't stand out. Just follow what's popular, say what's safe, and agree with the loudest voice in the room. Schopenhauer called this the herd instinct, the natural pull for people to give up their own thoughts, not because they're not smart, but because thinking for yourself is risky. That's why truly intelligent people are often feared. Not because they're better, but because they refuse to follow the herd. When someone starts asking why, people around them get nervous. When someone points out the contradictions, the lies, or the outdated beliefs, Others get defensive. It's not logical. It's emotional. In every classroom, office, or community, there's a quiet pressure. Fit in or be pushed out. Intelligent people don't ignore this pressure. They simply can't obey it. Not because they want to rebel, but because they care about truth and understanding. But here's the hard truth. Thinking differently isn't always celebrated. It's often treated like a threat. Because intelligence doesn't just ask questions, it breathes. To be truly intelligent is to feel misunderstood. To walk into rooms and feel alone, even as everyone around you agrees on things you know aren't true. It's not just rejection. It's a kind of exile. Because once you see the game for what it is, you stop playing. And when you stop playing, you stop belonging. Have you ever felt like the more clearly you see the world, the harder it becomes to be part of it? For those who refuse to betray their own minds, there is a price, one they pay quietly, every single day. But Arthur Schopenhauer believed that this suffering wasn't meaningless. In fact, he saw intelligence not as a privilege, but as a burden, one that only a few are strong enough to carry. And those who do carry it often walk a lonelier, but also more honest path. Schopenhauer wasn't a typical philosopher. He didn't sugarcoat life or promise happiness. Instead, he believed that life, at its core, is suffering. And the more conscious you are, the more deeply you feel it. To some, that may sound dark. But to those who have lived through the silent pain of thinking too much and feeling too deeply, it sounds like the truth, finally spoken out loud. Born in 1788 in Germany, Schopenhauer grew up in a wealthy but emotionally cold home. His father was a strict, logical businessman, and his mother a socialite who later rejected his views. From an early age, Schopenhauer felt like an outsider. He watched life unfold with a kind of depth that made him feel more like a witness than someone actually living it. And that's exactly how his philosophy took shape. One of his most famous ideas was this: a man can be himself only so long as he is alone. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence leads to isolation, not by choice but as a consequence. The more you understand life, the more you begin to feel distant from those who live only on the surface. At the center of his worldview was the concept of the will, a blind, irrational force that drives all living things. It isn't logical. It doesn't care about truth. It just wants, endlessly, blindly, painfully. In Schopenhauer's view, most people are ruled by this will. They chase pleasure, power, and approval, not because they've thought deeply about it, but because they're stuck in a cycle of desire they can't even see. But the truly intelligent, the thinkers, the observers, they start to see through this trap. They step back. They question. And that's when the suffering begins. Because once you see the world clearly, as a place full of illusions powered by craving and fear, you can't unsee it. You stop laughing at the same jokes. Small talk feels hollow. You drift through life like a ghost at a party, wondering why no one else seems to notice the emptiness. Schopenhauer once said, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." In other words, ignorance isn't just bliss, it's belonging. When you begin asking deeper questions about meaning, death, and morality, you often lose your place in the group. Not because others hate you, but because they don't understand you. Schopenhauer didn't hate society. He simply believed that society and solitude offer different things. Society keeps us entertained, but solitude brings us closer to truth. And intelligent people, sooner or later, crave what society can't give: silence, clarity, and authenticity. That's why he praised solitude, not as loneliness, but as freedom. "Great men are like eagle," he wrote, "and build their nests on some lofty solitude." To him, intelligence wasn't glamorous. It was a kind of curse, one that takes away comfort and pushes you into isolation. But he didn't believe that meant giving up. Instead, he believed there was a higher way to live, through reflection, art, and philosophy, by turning your pain into insight and your loneliness into wisdom. He was one of the few who dared to say it. The pain you feel from thinking too much is real. The disconnection you feel when others don't understand your thoughts, that's valid. the sense that something isn't right with the world. What if that feeling means you're not broken, just awake? You're not imagining it. And that's why Schopenhauer's work still resonates so deeply with people who feel out of place. The ones who sit quietly in classrooms, meetings, or family dinners, surrounded by noise but starving for meaning. For Schopenhauer, suffering was the price of seeing clearly. While the world often mocks those who think and feel too deeply, he offered a quiet truth from the pages of his books. You are not broken. You are just awake. His philosophy wasn't about fixing life. It was about surviving it without lying to ourselves. He urged us to face darkness, not with fear, but with dignity. Because even though intelligence may isolate you from others, it connects you with something deeper, with truth, with beauty, with your own soul. And that, Schopenhauer believed, is a higher kind of connection. On one hand, highly intelligent people are deeply introspective. They think, reflect, and imagine entire worlds in their minds, worlds they might never fully share. But on the other hand, they're still human. They long for connection, for someone who truly understands, not just someone who nods politely, but someone who actually gets it, who hears what's unsaid and sees what's hidden. This isn't arrogance, it's biology. Psychologist Dr. Thomas Suddendorf, an expert in cognitive evolution, explains that our brains evolved in small tribal groups of around 100 to 150 people. Intelligence was originally shaped for survival within close-knit communities. But modern high IQ individuals live in a very different world. Their minds move faster, see more, question more, and that makes them emotional outsiders. Not because something's wrong, but because the world simply isn't built for their kind of thinking. This disconnect hurts. Deep intelligence often brings emotional overload, not because the world is cruel, but because there's too much going on inside. Imagine thinking 10 thoughts where others think one. Imagine noticing every tiny change in someone's face during a conversation. Imagine replaying a single sentence for hours, wondering what it really meant. This kind of sensitivity isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a heavy weight. It can lead to anxiety, depression, and emotional burnout. Not because you're weak, but because you feel and think in ways most people don't. Have you ever felt like your mind is both your greatest strength and your hardest battle? Research suggests that highly intelligent children often feel isolated and anxious from a young age. They notice early on that they are different, but instead of being supported, they're often criticized. People tell them, "You think too much. Why can't you just be normal? Stop asking so many questions." Over time, they internalize those words. They begin to wonder, maybe something's wrong with me. This creates a constant inner struggle, a tug-of-war between wanting to express themselves and needing to protect themselves. They long to open up, but they've been shut down too many times. They want real connection, but they've learned it's safer to stay quiet. So they build emotional walls and wait, hoping someone might see past the silence. But most people never do. Even in romantic relationships, this pattern continues. Highly intelligent individuals often feel unseen, not just misunderstood, but misread. They may seem distant or emotionally closed off, but what they're really doing is protecting a depth that's been ignored, judged, or mishandled too many times before. It's not that they don't want love, it's that most people love the idea of intelligence, not the emotional weight that comes with it. Psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski called this intense sensitivity overexcitability. He found that gifted individuals often feel more intellectually, emotionally, imaginatively, physically, and psychologically. In simpler terms, smart people don't just think more, they feel more. And while this fuels creativity and insight, it also deepens the distance between them and the world around them. But here's the hidden truth. Loneliness doesn't always mean something is missing. Sometimes it means something is unmatched. A mind that sees through illusions, a heart that craves deep connection, a soul that values meaning over comfort. A person like that will always feel a little set apart, not because they failed at life, but because they're wired for something rarer and more profound. So if you've ever felt that kind of loneliness, not just the absence of people, but the absence of resonance, it may not be a curse. It might be a quiet sign that you're one of the few who are not just living, but truly awake. You might think intelligence naturally draws admiration, and in some ways it does. But often, behind that admiration hides something darker: envy. And envy has a strange way of turning respect into rejection. Most people don't admit this, not even to themselves. But in everyday life, intelligent people often face subtle resentment, not because they're arrogant, but because their presence reveals something painful in others: insecurity. When someone walks into a room and speaks with clarity, depth, or confidence, some won't truly hear what they're saying. Instead, they hear their own self-doubt. They feel small, unseen, or less capable. That sting? It's not about the speaker. It's the ego trying to defend itself. This is where the Dunning-Kruger effect comes in. It's a psychological pattern where people with low ability tend to overestimate their competence because they don't know what they don't know. Now, when someone truly intelligent enters that space, it shakes their illusion of being competent. And rather than face this discomfort, many react by lashing out. They label the intelligent person as arrogant, cold, or acting like they're. This isn't just something from the past. It still happens today. Innovators, deep thinkers, true speakers, they often face rejection, not just online, but in real life. In offices, they're ignored. In classrooms, they're labeled disruptive. In relationships, they're told they're too much. Why? Because intelligence without conformity is dangerous. It disturbs people's comfort. It makes mediocrity obvious. And in a world addicted to illusion, that's unforgivable. Here's the paradox. People say they admire intelligence, but only if it doesn't make them question themselves. They'll quote a genius on social media, watch a philosopher on YouTube, but put them in the same room with someone who sees too clearly, feels too deeply, and speaks too honestly, and suddenly they pull away. So if you've ever been rejected not for being wrong, but for being clear, for seeing through the surface, it's not because you failed. It's because you showed them something they weren't ready to face. And in a world ruled by ego, that's more threatening than being evil. So, what do you do when the very thing that makes you unique is also what makes you feel alone? When your mind explores depths others never reach, but no one around you seems to notice or care? Arthur Schopenhauer didn't pretend this pain could be erased with feel-good quotes. He didn't offer toxic positivity. Instead, he gave a hard but freeing answer: solitude. He believed that intellectual depth almost always leads to a need for solitude, not as a punishment, but as a kind of freedom. Because here's the truth: the more profound your thoughts, the more likely they will echo in silence. And to Schopenhauer, that silence wasn't a void, it was clarity. In a world terrified of being alone, people chase constant distraction, messages, likes, noise. They measure their worth by attention. But Schopenhauer turned that idea upside down. He said, the one who can be alone and still feel whole, that is the strongest kind of person. Solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is craving connection and not finding it. Solitude is choosing peace over shallow company. It's not the absence of people. It's the presence of yourself. Schopenhauer believed that deep thinkers naturally withdraw, not because they hate others, but because they are simply tired. Tired of surface-level talk, tired of pretending, tired of always being misunderstood. So tell me, do you ever find peace not in crowds, but in quiet moments with just your own thoughts? Schopenhauer once implied that ordinary people are like clocks, always ticking in the same direction, repeating the same thoughts, cycling through the same patterns. But the noble intellect, he believed, is more like a compass. It doesn't just move, it points. It searches for direction, truth, meaning. And you can't follow that inner compass in a loud, chaotic room. You need quiet. You need space. That's what solitude offers, something society never can: freedom. Not just physical freedom, but mental and emotional independence. The freedom to think without being interrupted, to feel without being judged, to create without needing approval. Solitude is where great ideas are born. Art, philosophy, science, vision. None of these came from noisy crowds. They were forged in stillness. Schopenhauer spent most of his life in quiet reflection. He wasn't popular. He wasn't widely praised in his time, but he understood something timeless. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free. And here's the real power of solitude. When you stop needing validation, you become untouchable. Rejection stops hurting. You no longer shape yourself to fit places where you don't belong. You stop shrinking your thoughts to make others comfortable. That quiet time alone becomes a sanctuary, a forge for your strength, a mirror for your truth. This is the brutal brilliance of Schopenhauer's solution. Don't chase society's acceptance. Let it misunderstand you. Let it reject you. Because that rejection isn't failure. It's proof of your depth. The world doesn't ignore deep thinkers because they're wrong. It ignores them because they threaten what's familiar and easy. So if you've ever been called too intense, too deep, too analytical, Schopenhauer would say, good. It means you're no longer a prisoner of the herd. Solitude, then, is not an escape. It's a return to your own mind, your own energy, your true self. You stop performing. You start being. And slowly, in the quiet, you begin to see what others can't. You notice beauty in silence, patterns in pain, meaning in things others overlook. You stop trying to belong and start becoming. That's what Schopenhauer called the noble intellect. Not noble by birth, but noble in inner richness. And it's not for everyone. Most people run from solitude because it forces them to understand who you are. Truly, the journey of an intelligent soul is never a straight line. It often begins in confusion, asking, why don't I fit in? Then comes clarity. Maybe I was never meant to. And finally, strength. I don't need to. Somewhere along that path, loneliness changes. It stops feeling like a wound and becomes a mirror. One that reflects your truth, your vision, and your potential. Schopenhauer once wrote, great men are like eagles and build their nests on some lofty solitude, not because they are arrogant, but because they need silence to see clearly. From that height, you're no longer lost in the noise. You rise above it. So if society rejects you, let it. That rejection is not failure. It's proof. Proof that you think deeply, that you feel honestly, that you're done trading your authenticity for approval. You're not lost. You're just ahead of your time. And while others may eventually catch up, or never do, you will already be free. If you've made it this far, you're not just watching a video. You're searching for meaning, for truth, for something real. And that already sets you apart. Maybe you've always felt different, like you think too much, feel too deeply, or care about things others ignore. Maybe the world has made you wonder if that's a flaw. It's not. It's clarity. Schopenhauer believed the loneliest paths often belong to the clearest minds. That clarity might isolate you, yes, but it also frees you. Here at Cyphus, this space exists for minds like yours, for people who think deeply, question everything, and refuse to settle for surface-level answers. You are not alone in how you think or feel. This community was created for you. If this message resonated, consider subscribing for more deep dives into psychology, philosophy, and the human mind. Share this video with someone who might need it. And if you've ever felt this kind of isolation, tell your story in the comments. I read every single one. Let's build a community for those who don't fit in. Because maybe we were never meant to. So tell me, have you ever felt like your mind doesn't match the world around you?